I'm joined today by Rolando Katan, a third year at Yale and the president of the Yale International Relations Association. Rolando, thank you so much for joining me today.
No, thank you so much for having me, Frank.
So, a lot of our listeners know Model UN. They're either in high school, they're their parents. We have a few college students that listen. Can you explain right off the bat? Let's explain what YIRA is exactly.
Yeah, so YIRA is currently Yale's largest student organization. Um, Basically, a couple of five undergraduates got together in 1975. They were they had this impetus of projecting the Yale education, the Yale mission outside of the campus. They were very globally minded students, and you know, using Model UN as their platform, they founded YIRA, and years after they founded Wyman. Today, it serves as not only a Model UN hub, but we also have several publications, the Yale Review of International Studies. We have our program Hemispheres, where we teach local New Haven high schoolers about international relations. And of course, we hold on campus speakers and international relations related events.
And now, just to explain to folks, YIRA is one of these organizations that has both independent nonprofit and a student organization. Can you explain how that works?
Yeah, that's right. We're a Yale affiliated organization. So we run normally as a student club. But we also have a nonprofit status. That just basically helps us it makes things easier when we're like negotiating with partners, our venues and stuff like that. It helps us save a couple of bucks here and there. But yeah.
So underneath YIRA, there's a bunch of different branches, like you were saying. You have your
Yeah,
collegiate travel team. You have YMUN, which is your high school
right.
conference. You have your academic journals, whole bunch. It's sort of cool what each of these universities is doing because it's so much more than just a high school Model UN conference. But I
Right.
really want to drill in on Wyman and its impact. So, can you talk just briefly about the history of that conference and how it relates to the larger organization?
Of course, yes. Wyman is our flagship project, our flagship product, you may even call it. Wyman, as I said, was founded in 1975. We're currently on the 50th iteration of Wyman. Currently, we had around 2,000 students on campus, and we had Secretary General Ban Ki-moon as our keynote speaker. Um, Wyman has the evolution of Wyman has been very remarkable. I think what's really special about Wyman, different from other conferences, it's that it's the largest Model UN conference ran in an Ivy League campus. And that has been something very crucial to the essence of what we want to do with Wyman, like incorporate Yale and Yale's values, Yale's educational mission into the conference. Around the early 2000s, we ran into a capacity problem where Wyman couldn't accommodate as many students as we would like to. I think our to like 2000 is the most New Haven can accommodate based on hotels and restaurants and stuff like that. So what happened is that we started expanding Wyman beyond the United States, and we now have nine other Wyman conferences um, across the globe in all continents except Oceania and Antarctica. And our mission is pretty clear. I think we either want to bring kids to our conference, we want to bring high school students to our conference, or bring the conference to them, all with the mission of making a Yale education more accessible, making it more financially accessible, geographically accessible, um, and because Yale feels very mysterious at times. The mission of YIRA is the same mission that those 5 undergraduates have, right? Like projecting Yale to as many people as we can.
I'm really glad that you brought up the fact that the signature conference for Wyman happening in New Haven is on campus, because when I talk to teachers that go to Wyman, that is one of the first things they say that they value, is that it's actually on a campus and it's not in a giant hotel for 4 days. So students can actually
Yes.
get to feel the campus, experience the culture, see what it's like to attend Yale. So that's something that I applaud you guys for, and I think is a real draw for students and schools to attend. Um, as Yale began these conferences overseas, and you've only been at the university for 3 years, but I don't know if you can take us back in history as to what those discussions may have looked like. You said obviously it's about
Yeah.
expanding Yale's presence globally and giving more students
Yeah.
opportunities, but what do you think some of the early obstacles may have been when you decided to start running these conferences overseas?
Yeah. So I've been in the as you said, I've been in YIRA, involved in YIRA for 3 years. I was a delegate in Wyman actually, as a high school student. But in my year particularly, and I think it can be very relevant to what you're asking me. In my year, we expanded Wyman to 5 more countries. So before last year, we had Wyman, and then we had 4 other conferences. During my year, we expanded to India, the United Arab Emirates, Brazil, China, and Singapore. What was the thought process around that? Behind that, basically the the benefits were clear, right? It was the discussion with the board was not about the benefits, because we all were very excited of not only bringing Wyman to other people, but also like the experience that it is for Yale students to travel and engage, and have the opportunity to mentor high school students. So the difficulties were honestly financial, right? So we are a student club. We do not receive any funding from Yale. Um, so it was a matter of finding the right partners that would help us make these conferences logistically possible. I think we've this expansion has relied a lot on colleges and high schools that can help us on the ground recruit delegates, find right prices for venues. It wouldn't have been possible without our various partners. But that I would say was the number one preoccupation we had with this expansion, the logistical and financial constraints.
And that's a notable expansion, right? You basically doubled the number of international conferences in about a year. What was that discussion like on a board level to take on such an ambitious expansion, basically just coming out of the COVID pandemic?
Yes, it was certainly an ambitious expansion. That was kind of like the mindset. Um, there was a certain reluctance, right, as with everything, but everyone was pretty enthusiastic, because we have such a strong demand on campus for these events. I think that behind the scenes, it may be, well, from the perspective of high school from the high school community, it may not be as evident, but the enthusiasm of high school students to get involved in these things, sorry, of college students, of Yale students to get involved in YIRA and participate was so big. Our conferences, to run a conference, to be part of a secretariat, the applications we were getting, tons of applications, like 60 applications for 20 spots, 60 applications for 15 spots. And we were like, this is super ambitious, but what we have here is a mass of Yale students that really want to do this. And honestly, that was the one thing I would say that made us not necessarily overlook the potential hardships, but be comfortable with the hardships and uncertainty that was going to arise from this. I would even call it overly ambitious expansion.
So you have You have 10 conferences. Does that include the New Haven conference or no? So
Yes,
it
that
does.
includes New Haven. Yeah.
How many students get to participate in these programs because they exist?
Um, so we haven't had the total count yet. We have like 5 conferences happening right now in over spring break. I would say the average number of participants for our international conferences is around 350. Wyman India right now had 600 participants, so we have more. They're definitely smaller than Wyman. Some of them, again, other conferences in, for example, our conference in China is looking very ambitious again to scale to those levels. Um, so we won't have the exact number until April. But I would say it's around 3,000. Actually, no, it's not.
No, it's going to be way
It's
more
really
than
hard to
that
give you a number,
back in
but
the envelope math. Yeah.
4,000. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, so
four
I
thousand.
mean, this is the point that I want to stress. Like, let's even call it. We'll give you the benefit of the doubt. Let's call it 5,000. 5,000 students, not counting overlap, and it not really worth going into the details there. But
Yeah.
5,000 opportunities exist around the world, not because of the university and the administration, but because of the students. And that's the point I really want to drive home. Right? You guys are making a choice to spend your time doing this. So the big question is why.
Oh, that's a really wonderful question. I think that the main reason why, um, and I'm gonna speak from personal experience, but I think many of us share this, is because as a high school student from Honduras, I there was very little access to, you know, information about higher education in the United States. One day I got one email. My delegation got an email um, to participate in Wyman, and just the entire process that goes into going to a conference as a high school student, like the research skills you developed, the public speaking skills, the writing skills in resolutions, all the things you practice, they are really like Model UN is a simulation, but the skills that it teaches you are widely applicable to almost every field in the professional world. And I feel that Yale students specifically have our students that are engaged in the planning process of these conferences have experienced the benefits of Model UN outside of Model UN, and they're just so passionate about bringing that to other people. A point I want to also emphasize is that we have a big culture of wanting to provide financial aid for these conferences because we recognize that um, delegate fees may not be accessible for everyone. Traveling may not be accessible for everyone. So for this year in Wyman, we provided last year it was $35,000 of financial aid. This year we provided $100,000 of financial aid. Wyman India we provided $70,000 of financial aid. So we want to keep on making these skills that were so valuable to us um, widely accessible to as many people as we can.
And that's very much the university model, right? People that can afford the full ticket pay the full ticket so that others can participate and you can increase the diversity of the background, the diversity of geography,
Yeah.
all these really, really important things that are really core at what a liberal arts education is supposed to symbolize. Um, I'm going to ask two specific questions here, and they're more favors than questions. All American Model UN's been going to your conference in Europe for 8 years, I want to say, with the exception of the virtual pandemic years. Um, can you talk about before the pandemic, that conference used to be known as Yale Model Government Europe, and it was a EU focused simulation. But this year, it's
Yeah.
Yale Model UN Europe. What was the decision there? And can you please go back to the old one? Because I loved the EU specific simulation, especially because it'll be in Brussels this year. But what was the process? Was it more about aligning the brands? Was it a logistical decision? What was the driving force behind that change?
Yeah, well, that's That's it's really good to know that you enjoyed the European Union simulation. It's something that we will definitely stress to keep last year for the upcoming years. The decision behind it was not so much to change the content of the conference, but just to make it more. It was a branding decision. It was a marketing decision. um, Not many people were familiar with the model government
Hmm.
um, activity. Actually, Yale model government was not part of YIRA in like feel 2006, 2007. Like they joined YIRA, so it's
Interesting. I didn't
so
know that. I actually know one of the early
yeah.
people that helped to establish that conference, so I had no idea.
Yeah. So this is also something that happens a lot. Students have like start a conference and they want to give continuity, so they put their conference under year end. Europe provides that logistical and financial support for those conferences to last. But yeah, the idea behind it was just purely marketing.
And
I
that
think
makes
the
sense,
concept
right? Because
remains.
people
Yeah.
know what a Model UN is. Uh, there's a lot more education that has to go on when you say, "Oh, it's a model government," right?
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah, definitely.
One of the cool conferences that has caught my eye that I have been wanting to figure out how to get onto my roster for the last 2 years is your Yale Model African Union. Can you talk specifically about that conference? Because that's one that really stood out to me when I was looking at the conference roster.
Yes, that conference is really special for everyone in Yura. It's currently on its third iteration. Um, the idea of that conference is what there is an impetus to like it's what we want to have um, as our model. It's first of all a college conference, right? It's for college students, but we also accept on a case to case basis high school students that really want to participate. It almost, I think it's 80% of the participants are on financial aid. Not only means fee waivers, but like means transport and lodging logistics. It happened in Rwanda this year. It's happening in South Africa. It's moving across the African continent. And I think what's really special about that conference is that it takes a more I want to say it takes Model UN with more gravitas, and it does so by I attended the first iteration of that conference actually as a delegate, and we had the U.S. representative, which was the charge at that time. They currently didn't have an ambassador. Came with a 15 students room and just had a very honest discussion. Not those big speaker panels that you have in Model UN conferences, but more intimate discussions with African entrepreneurs, policymakers, and it's meant to elevate the dialogue. Um, have career opportunities. We have a networking fair. It's meant more for college students and that really want to have an impact in the real world.
I love that. I love that. Um, with all of these conversations, I like to start at the top level and sort of work my way down to the individual. So now I want to ask you about you. Why did you decide, and how did you become president of this organization?
Yes, that's a really interesting question. I actually came into Yale, and you have at Yale your big organizations and small organizations. I like to call them big organizations is the YDN. You have which is the college newspaper. You have the Yale College Council. You have Dwight Hall, which is a nonprofit. A nonprofit organization that works in New Haven, but it's run by Yale, and you have YIRA. I may be missing a couple. The reason why I chose YIRA is because as an international student, I really wanted my efforts to be projected outwards from Yale. I am very cognizant of the immense privilege that I have of attending to Yale, of all the opportunities we have here. So it's kind of, I had this urge to give back to other people who did not have the same opportunities. Um, YIRA and Dwight Hall were the best organizations that aligned with that mission. The difference and why I ultimately chose to join YIRA over Dwight Hall is because um, Dwight Hall is run by Yale. It's executed by students, but ultimately administered by Yale. YIRA is not. So you have more agency in doing and projecting the change that you want to see. The process of becoming president, it has been a tradition here that it is kind of, you have to go through all of the programs of the organization, like be in as many positions as you can, understand all the nuts and crannies, to then be able to have that more forest view as opposed to the individual trees. So I would say it was a lot of work. I still remember elections week. It was one of the busiest weeks I've had in my life, but it was ultimately worth it.
One of the things that I like to highlight using this platform is all of the skills and activities and masteries that Model UN leaders have to have in order to successfully run their organization. So we can talk about the diplomacy and the speaking and the writing and the negotiation of the activity itself. But I don't think we do a good enough job as a community talking about how valuable the skills of administration, if you will, are to the activity. So, can you talk about what your role actually requires? What are your responsibilities as the leader of this organization? What do you have to actually operate against?
Yes. So from the administration, like we like to say that YIRA has um, something to do for anyone. We have pre-med students, computer science. So we don't only have like political science, global affairs students, because there's we have everything to do. Um, I would say that at the begin, my role, I'm finishing my term this April, but my role has mainly been um, in the beginning, kind of like laying the groundwork of this expansion. We had a bunch of summer programming as well, where we had some MUN training camps. Um, so it was kind of like establishing those programs, finding leadership for those programs, and from there, it it has been a job of execution. But beyond that, I think conflict resolution within that execution. I think we like to say that as secretary generals, you are hired to be a firefighter. I think the same applies. Like the job of it on a day-to-day basis. It's just, we are humans. There are confrontations, bad things happen, interpersonal conflicts are present all the time, and it's just finding the way to find the middle ground between those.
I love that you answered that with a human answer, and you didn't just dive into the technology and the budgeting and the paperwork, but you talked about the hard skill. Well, I guess they're called soft skills now, but the skills that you need to be successful ultimately come down to your relationships with other people and how you handle problems when they arise. And I love that messaging for everyone who's listening. Rolando, I think that's a great place to end it. I really, really appreciate your time today. Thanks for coming on.
Yeah, I would also like to mention something
Absolutely.
additional, which is thank you, Frank, for all the work that you do in promoting this activity, and thank all the advisors, because it it is, I feel, one of being a Model UN advisor. I think it's one of the most unrecognized, uh, jobs there could be. Um, but the impact that Model UN advisors have on people here. Like yesterday, just yesterday, I was talking with a friend was talking about her life in one of our traditions where you at Yale, where you just talk about your life, and she was saying how her Model UN advisor saved her life. Literally, the support, the educational, you know, support system that you build around it is just, it's just amazing, and I really want to thank you that as a student, you know, as a member of YIRA, I really appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I share that appreciation. I'm lucky. I don't have to teach. I don't work within a school setting. I can sort of do and coach however I want. But I'm sure I'm thinking back to my high school Model UN advisor now, and all the work and support and extra time that she had to put into helping me as a high school student. I think it's really really special, and I'm going to second you on that. I think we really need to celebrate these folks.
Yes, definitely.
All right, thank you so much.
No, thank you.